Hey buds, old and gold here. Names. Everybody's got 'em, everybody gives 'em, and everybody knows what they are. Names are everywhere. I mean, words are basically names we give to convey things, and names are important. And it is for that last reason that many fantasy writers struggle with naming their everything. Names tend to be the next thing the reader remembers beyond the basic plot, so there's intense pressure in making them not suck. So in this video, I will give you some of my advice on how I personally go about naming things, to perhaps give you some ideas on how to name your names. I've already said name way too many times, but don't worry, because it's going to get a lot worse. Now, there are a lot of other videos on this topic throughout YouTube, so what makes this one worth watching? I mean, these other videos are chock full of information, funny, and with a far greater subscriber count. What, you think you're better than me? Alright, that's it! See, the difference between this video and all the others is that this one is made by me. Only profound statements on the Old and Gold channel. Now, my first tip for world building names is base the name on something. A defining character trait, their purpose in the story, the geography of the area, anything really. None of us can just make up a fitting and memorable name out of nothing, as it goes for the rest of world building as well. I mean, the pioneer of pioneers in the fantasy genre, J.R.R. Tolkien, based so much of the Lord of the Rings on Old English literature like Beowulf. Additionally, having the name be based on something important to whatever it is that you are naming provides it with further significance, depth, and characterization. Names have connotations and implications behind them, so if you want your character to be associated with something, be sure to take advantage of this. An example of this connotation and action in the real world is, despite the popularity of the name Adolf in the first half of the 20th century, you don't see that many Adolfs running around nowadays, the reason for which, I am sure, we are all aware of. It can be used for place names as well. Suppose you want to name a mountain range that is well known for its rocky peaks and for being a bit of a dangerous area. A name such as the Needles would be good as it conveys both the physical appearance of the mountains and the danger which it emanates, as needles are sharp, and as sharp boys do, they can stab you. Besides, names with meaning tend to sound a whole lot better than those without. The second tip I have is, modify pre-existing words and names from other languages into new and unique names. No better place to look for cool sounds in words than our own many languages. Languages that themselves bring characterization. Say you want to name the capital city of a heavily Arabic-inspired desert country. Just go to your good old friend Google Translate and set it from English to Arabic. Now take a central aspect of the city, maybe it's well known for the might of its walls, and translate that word into its Arabic equivalent. Take that Arabic word, change it to Latin letters, mix up the spelling and formatting a bit, and huna, there is the name for that capital city. Al-Judran. Of course, this is just how I personally would do it, but the beauty of this method is that anyone can change it in any way they see fit. It's flexible. And better yet, it sounds realistic and believable, and not like a bunch of phonemes haphazardly strapped together, because it's based on a real word from a real language. Speaking of which, the third tip is to take inspiration and names from other places. Of course, as a dirty history major, I heavily recommend looking at old historical names. Using these can give your story a more fantastical feeling, as having characters named Ethelwulf and Orion running around brings an increased peculiarity than if they were named James and Kyle. Similar to that previously mentioned in the first tip, historical names also bring connotations between the historical figures and those with the same name. Want to have a character be associated with anatomy and dissection? Boom. A love of arts and mommy issues? Boom. An ancient unifier through conquest? Boom. You could also go the Hirohiko Araki way in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and have names be inspired by or direct references to something, typically music or fashion. I for one do this quite a bit because it's a lot of fun to put your favorite anything into a story and expose your readers to what you love, just as watching JoJo has done for me. For example, I love heavy metal music, if you couldn't tell just by looking at me. And in my current writing project, one character is based off of and is a reference to the band Megadeth, one of my favorites. This character was named Vic, and his weapon, which was basically like a pressure washer sniper rifle, was named Rattlehead. His face was described as very gaunt, with almost a skull-like appearance, and when asked about his occupation, he replied with, "Killing is my business, and business is good." He's an assassin. I know what you're thinking. My subtlety is obvious. Obviously great. Point being, you can take inspiration from other places, be it history or media you enjoy, to create your own names. The fourth tip is that sometimes less is more. When people think of fantasy names, they tend to think of those long, strange, and convoluted names. You know, the kind you see on Fantasy Name Generator. You know, Aroviar Kinrad of Riskane. The only problem I have with these kinds of names is that they have the memorable staying power of Thor the Dark World. Unless you spend a lot of time with a character having such a name, the reader isn't going to remember it or really care for it. Ironically, if there are a lot of these convoluted names in a story, by them trying to be so unique, they end up blending together. These names don't have the striking impact that a simple and to-the-point name could have. I think the best example of this can be seen in Game of Thrones. Stark, Snow, Tyrell, Hightower. These are not complicated names. Some are only one syllable, but they carry with them a far greater punch and memorability than some flashy 5-syllable name. Now, whilst there are some extravagant names I like, such as Baranzaya from the Elder Scrolls series, these longer names still flow well and are not agonizing to pronounce. Basically, what I'm trying to say is just because you can make the most strange and unique names you can think of, doesn't mean that it'll work. Finally, the fifth tip I have to offer is to have the place names within a region be consistent with each other. The most significant influence on a place's name is the language of those who named it. Therefore, when naming the places of a region populated by a distinct people and language, have those place names sound like they come from the same language. It doesn't make sense to have cities named Bahnhof, Großschingen, Hauptstadt, and Bachigai all be placed right next to each other in the same region. You could use the names created from tip 2 for this purpose. Just make sure they are all based on the same language or language branch if you don't want to be too limited. The benefits of doing this is that it easily presents the uniqueness and cultural flair of the region in contrast to its neighbors that your reader can see on your map alone. Not to mention, it gives not only your map, but your world far more depth and realism than if it was all based on one language or the different languages were splattered all over the place. If you really want to go further into this, you could even have language variations within regions. Say one end of the region is English-based and the other is German. Then in the middle blending areas, the place names could be based off Dutch. Languages have specific areas where they are dominant in the real world. Have your place names in your fantasy world reflect this. Right, so there were some tips I have for world building names. This is just the methods I use, so you can modify them or ignore them to your heart's delight. World building is like Slab City. There are no rules. However, I hope you got something out of these, whether for your own world building or just for entertainment. My name is Olden Gold, and these were some tips on world building names.